Without much introduction, I am going to bring Jesmond Harding up to here, who is a butterfly expert, founding member of Butterfly Conservation Ireland, and the author of at least 2 books on butterflies. So, no surprise, he will talk to us about butterflies of the burn.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Brian and Anya. The butterflies of the burn, I get to give a lovely talk, colourful. They're a charismatic group and are generally representative of the broader biodiversity of the Burren. There are 31 species here, higher than anywhere else in Ireland. All 3 butterflies rated endangered in Ireland occur in the Burren, so you have the small blue, pearl border fritillary and wall brown. The Burren is the national stronghold for 2 butterflies rated vulnerable on the red list that Brian referred to earlier, the Marsh Fritillary and the dark green Fritillary, and 3 rated near threatened, Dingy Skipper, wood white and the small Heath. And 2 of Ireland's butterflies occur in the Burren as subspecies, the Dingy Skipper, the baynesi form, and the Grayling clarensis form. The Burren is an extensive area with suitably managed, high-quality, unspoiled habitats, often occurring as transitional zones and mosaics, which provides ideal breeding sites for many Lepidoptera species, both butterflies and moths. Brian referred earlier to the eastern Burren region as an area with high butterfly biodiversity and populations. The reasons for that generally is that those areas are much more sheltered than parts of the west. There's a lot of habitat mosaics in those areas, particularly where scrub interfaces with limestone grassland, so that the shelter and the warmth are key ingredients. Even if you're in the Burren uplands in the west of the Burren, for example, you will see how windswept it is. And although the plants are there, populations are generally a lot lower than you would expect given the food plants are present. Now, this is the Dingy Skipper, the baynesi form. This is a female, and it was first described in 1956. The difference between this and the form found in the rest of the country is the ground colour is blackish brown rather than brownish grey, and the lighter colour is sometimes almost white. I don't know if it's a real subspecies or a cline that has developed or through natural selection, but it certainly blends in beautifully with the limestone. It rests a lot on limestone pavement and it blends in perfectly with it, helping it to avoid predation. It breeds on common bird's foot trefoil, which is a really common plant in the Burren. It generally breeds on common bird's foot trefoil growing among grasses or other vegetation, rather than trefoil that's straggling across bare rock. The next species is a very interesting species. This is the wood white. This was taken in Cluncoos Valley. And you can see it there, nectaring. See, it's a male, the white spot on the antennae. Beautiful butterfly, really kind of a gentle, kind of a mirage-like flight, of a floppy, gentle flight. It flies nice and low, quite easy to distinguish from other whites, even on the wing, because of the really low, gentle flight. This is double brooded in the Burren, but not in every year. In 2012, there was just 1 brood, but in most years there are 2 broods, like in Surrey, for example, in the south of England. So it is warm enough here to generate a second brood. The second brood is generally a lot smaller than the first. It flies usually from early May in the first brood to probably mid-June. And the second brood is usually around the end of July to about the middle of August. A fascinating species and quite common in open scrub areas where you have limestone with patches of scrub, and the food plants generally used here are the meadow vetchling and tufted vetch, especially for the second brood, and also bitter vetch. I've seen it use that too. This butterfly seems to be doing well in the Burren. I don't have a conservation concern about it as long as its habitat is protected. It breeds right up against the scrub. So what it's doing is it's laying eggs not in the open but right up against the scrub where literally the food plant meets the scrub. So it's those zones, the really key zones right between grassland and scrub. And why it doesn't occur in the rest of Ireland? I think the reason for that is that it needs succulent food plants, rain-fed, but also hot, quite hot tangles of vegetation for the larva to develop. Now, this is the brimstone, a scattered distribution in Ireland, linked with the presence of its food plants, common buckthorn and purging buckthorn. Both of them occur in the Burren. Purging buckthorn is especially common. Again, it's a beautiful site. It's our longest lived adult butterfly. It breeds in spring, having overwintered. And it's a wonderful site in spring, real pick-me-up after a long, bleak winter. And winter can look really, really bleak in the Burren. The vegetation has that very bleached, kind of desolate look. You would never think it's the vibrant place it is at this time of the year. It really can look drained and anemic. But early in spring, when the warm days come, the brimstone takes flight, it just lifts the whole landscape, that beautiful daffodil yellow male. So it's a wonderful sight. This was taken in Cluncoos Valley, and you can see it's nectaring on common knapweed, which is really abundant in the Burren. Flower everywhere at the moment. This is green hairstreak. This is rare in the Burren. I've only seen it in Ballindereen, but Rinroe Marsh looks like in East Burren looks like a good place for it. It's generally in Ireland a butterfly of wetter habitats, not dry, karst, free-draining landscapes. It likes a lot of moisture around its food plants. It often breeds on cross-leaved heath, for example. So, and it has a range of other food plants too, but it generally is very, very rare in the Burren, but it does occur here. This is the brown hairstreak, and it's on the wing right now. I've seen it in Knockanroe in the National Park, quite close to the crossroads, so that treat awaits us, I hope. And it's a scrub species. It specialises on scrub, and it needs scrub that isn't cut. It really relies on its common blackthorn. It's a really common food plant found everywhere in Ireland, all parts of the country, but it's only really found in the Burren and one or two areas outside it to the north and a little bit east of the Burren. But generally speaking, it's doing well in the Burren, and one of the great things about the Burren for people who want to see this butterfly, there aren't many tall trees in the Burren. In England, where there are, the males are often way up in the canopy and hardly ever seen. But here we don't have many tall trees, and we don't have many species of tree here that have lots of aphid secretions on them. So it comes down to feed on flora, which is brilliant for people who want to see it. And the eggs are easily found on blackthorn in winter. Purple hairstreak. This was taken in Wicklow, actually, not in the Burren, but it occurs at Ballyaitor Woods and Garyland and probably other woodlands in the Burren as well. Oak is not that plentiful in the Burren. It tends to be a plant of deeper soils, although it does occur on thinner soils in some places. But again, a beautiful butterfly, restricted in the Burren, restricted in most of Ireland, to tell you the truth, apart from places like West Kerry and Oakwoods and Wicklow, but we do have it here. Small copper, really common in the Burren. Common sorrel and sheep sorrel are the larval food plants. This is a female. She's on a buttercup there. And again, this is in Cluncoos Valley, right beside the cottage. Small blue, one of our species of serious conservation concern. It has a scattered distribution in the Burren. The Ballyryan district in West Burren has good populations scattered over a fairly wide area. There's a small population in the Burren National Park. It breeds on kidney vetch, which is really vulnerable to overgrazing. It has just one food plant, and generally speaking, when that food plant is overgrazed, the butterfly disappears. Well, the butterfly disappears very quickly. Brian referred earlier to the grazing issue. That might be something that would need to be looked at. There is some overgrazing in parts of the Burren, and it has disappeared from some areas. So it is a species we need to take care of. This is a common blue. This is the classic Burren form, the Maris color form, colour of the sea. Beautiful butterfly. This was taken in the meadows at Knockanroe. Fantastic species. It breeds, it has 2, probably even 3 broods, and it's a delight. I've noticed that the specimens found in lowland areas in the Burren are considerably larger than the ones found in upland areas. That might be due to food plant quality, but it's an interesting observation. They're significantly larger, larger wingspans in lowland areas of the Burren. Holly blue, anywhere there's holly, but it does breed on plants like alder buckthorn as well. Pretty common in some areas of the Burren, especially wooded areas like Garyland, for example. Red Admiral, migrant, frequent in the Burren, plenty of them, lots of stinging nettles, saw them laying yesterday. Small tortoiseshell, very common throughout most of the country, and the Burren is no exception, although they do like shelter. They don't like the exposed areas, although the peacock, which again generally prefers sheltered areas, this does hilltop. I found it hilltopping yesterday in the Burren. They do hilltop. The reasons for it are not known. It has no breeding advantage. It doesn't breed this time of the year. But this species will hilltop. Pearl Border Fritillary, as Brian talked about earlier, this was taken in the National Park. A beautiful, beautiful butterfly. Even has blue eyes. What more do you want? This is the 100th anniversary of its discovery in the Burren. So I think we should be happy that we have it, and that Fogarty and Phillips found it that day in early June 1922, a few weeks before the Civil War broke out. So it was nice to know that people were still going about the ordinary business of life. Why does it occur in the Burren, only in the Burren in Ireland, when its food plant is so common, the common dog violet? I think it's similar to the wood white, and it's found in really similar habitat, although it has a different food plant. It likes succulent food plants, well nourished by the rain, well watered, but the larva cannot tolerate damp conditions. Damp conditions kill it. So you've got that double advantage of heavy rainfall in the Burren, followed by the porosity of the ground and the limestone. So it's regularly re-wet, but it drains away quickly. So they love those dry conditions. So it's really fussy. It likes wet and dry, and it gets that in the Burren. So scrub and violets growing right up against scrub is where you'll get it, with a mixture of direct sunlight and shade. Dark green fritillary, very abundant in some areas of the Burren. One of the fantastic sights in the Burren is the communal roosts. This species will roost communally in hundreds. For example, there's a wetland in Cluncoose, just opposite that cottage. I'm sure people who know Cluncoose know what I'm talking about. And there's a wetland there, and in June and July, hundreds converge in that wetland to roost there for the night. And you literally see, say, 2 square foot, and there'll be about 15 of them on it. It's phenomenal to see it. It really is. It's fantastic. It's a beautiful butterfly as well, and an absolutely superb aerial acrobat. It's wonderful to watch. It's a dynamic species. It flies directly into strong gale force winds. I was looking in the Burren uplands yesterday, and it's still in flight, but not in the lowlands, only in the uplands. Silver Wash Fritillary, that's a male. You can see from the bars on his wings. Woodland in the Burren. There's not that much woodland, but it does like mature scrub. And there's good tall stands of hazel that are quite open. It likes shadier conditions than our other fritillaries. And it seems to be doing quite well. It doesn't have the same population levels every year. Garyland Wood is a very good place for it. Marsh Fritillary, Brian referred to earlier, our only legally protected insect on Annex 2 of the EU Habitats Directive. This one was, again, taken in Cluncoose. One of the wonderful features of the Burren for this butterfly is it's found on a landscape level in some areas. It's not restricted to discrete sites. It occurs across the landscape. It's not relying on a metapopulation to repopulate itself. It's occurring on vast swathes of the landscape, which is really healthy. It's just a fantastic thing to see, and long may it continue. And the landscape generally seems to be managed very well for this species. Wall brown, a really sad story, really, not doing at all well. It's disappearing from vast areas of Ireland since the mid-1980s, since those 3 horrendous summers when farmers switched from hay to silage. It's really disappearing. It might be a victim of climate change as well, with an earlier growing season, warmer temperatures than earlier in the year, which results in more vigorous plant growth and cooling temperatures just above the soil level, which means the larva can't develop. Also, food plants are healthier with a lower proportion of dead material, and that dead plant material is vital for the caterpillar to bask on, to heat up and digest its food. It's not the summer generation that's in trouble, it's the spring. It's in the critical period in February and March when air temperatures are low and they can't develop under cold conditions. So I think that there's some research in the Netherlands on that, and that seems to be the only clear explanation as I can see, apart from things like nitrogen deposition as well from burning fossil fuels, which is also enriching the soils and probably making the food plants unsuitable for it. Still in the Burren, as its name suggests, those stone walls in the Burren, they're everywhere. And I kind of feel a bit negative about some of them because the stone is lifted from the fields, but it actually provide great habitats for wall brown butterflies because they get the sun and they get shade so the larva doesn't desiccate. In open grassland they would desiccate, and that's why they breed along walls. This is the Burren form of the Grayling, clarensis form. This was taken at Coolurta. It's a mating pair, and it's absolutely really abundant there and really abundant on Mullaghmore Mountain. I was looking at it, climbing Mullaghmore a couple of days ago, and it was really everywhere. It was dizzying at times to count them. So a wonderful butterfly, not doing it all well in many other parts of Ireland. There was a survey done on the Dublin coastline 2 years ago, and it's being searched again, and it was found in one location, Heath. That is scary. As a child used to seeing it all over the coastline, Dublin, Dollymount Strand, for example. It's very worrying to see that. Small Heath, this is at Coolurta as well. Humble little butterfly, not showy, but I think it's in serious decline in many parts of the country. Still doing well here. And, you know, when you see a really common butterfly, a widespread species with common food plants in decline, that should set every alarm bell ringing, because that tells you there's widespread environmental degradation. And that's why it's such an important indicator. It's not really a habitat specialist, but it's becoming one because of what we've done to the general landscape. I hate those nature programs where you see this fabulous wildlife, and the last 10 minutes they're telling you it's all in danger of collapsing. Yeah, and you think, why did I watch the bloody program? So I don't want to finish on a sad note. So we'll go to some of the reasons why these species are here. Well, it's the habitats. They're beautiful atmospheric habitats, but they're great for invertebrates as well. You have rich fen and flush. That is the site with the mass dark green fritillary roost in Cluncoos. It also contains the common species like green veined white and orange tip, which breed there on the wetland plants like the watercress and the cuckoo flower. So, as Brian mentioned, butterflies need different parts of the habitat for different purposes. That's not a breeding area, it's a roosting area. So the Burren has all those little mosaics together that caters for the various parts of the butterfly's life cycle. And that's why all those mosaics and that intimate mixture of habitats is so important for invertebrates generally and butterflies and moths. So there's marsh, wet grassland scrub, exposed calcareous rock mosaic all together. That's just down the road here, near where Brendan Dunford works in Fahey North, near the Burren Perfumery. And this has it's quite a small site, but it has about 25, 26 species of butterfly, and it's a wonderful place to actually go. If you're stuck for time and you want to see so many species in one place, this would be a good place to look. This is scrub with dry calcareous grassland and flower-rich clearings. This type of habitat is common across a lot of the Burren. And again, it suits species like Dingy Skipper, Pearl Border Fritillary, wood white, peacock, meadow brown, the common species as well. This is a close-up of dry calcareous grassland, and apart from being a visual feast, it's a feast for butterflies. I mean, look at the thyme, for example, there, which is a really good nectar plant for butterflies. Both large and small species will feed on it. Dark green fritillary is happy feeding on it as small copper. It's also a food plant for transparent burnet. And you've got it spilling onto the rock. So you see where the vegetation just verges onto the rock. You have a lovely little warm microclimate there. And you'll often get, that's what you call edge habitats. You'll often get species that breed right on the edge between one habitat and another, like the Pearl Border Fritillary, like the wood white, for example. Upland, these are exposed upland dry calcareous grassland and exposed calcareous rock. It does have butterflies on them. This is actually there's a fairly good colony of Marsh Fritillary breeding here. Marsh Fritillary doesn't mind exposed conditions if there are tufts of grass where the larvae can shelter and overwinter. Common blue and a range of common species. This is actually a very good site for the forester moth. And there is exposed calcareous rock, dry calcareous grassland, heath and scrub together at a lower elevation. So again, you can see the warmth. You can see the warmth coming off the picture, the photograph. But these are wonderful places to walk and wonderful places to observe butterflies, and certainly really high populations, especially of species like dark green fritillary, which are in trouble in Ireland. If you ask me what the best Burren site is, I would go for the Loch Fingal complex in Galway. It is 28 species. Why is it so good? Well, look at the habitat range there: alpine boreal heaths, semi-natural dry grasslands and scrubland facies, calcareous fens, limestone pavements. The transitions and gradations between the habitats, for example, between the turloughs, the lakes, and the limestone pavement. The limestone pavement itself is really variable in structure, and in its associated vegetation of heath, calcareous grassland and scrub. And that provides a range of physical conditions that favour many common and uncommon species. And there's light to moderate cattle grazing there, which maintains suitable conditions. And it's a wonderful site, really easy to access to. And it's just, the population of grayling and warbrown there, for example, is phenomenal. Now, that's a cheeky one. I don't want to intrude on Dave's premise, but it's just a moth they just love, and this was taken in the Burren. So thank you for your attention. I have copies of my book if anyone wants a copy later on, and thank you very much for your attention. I enjoyed that.
Thanks, Jesmond.
Thank you.
You actually finished ahead of schedule.
All right.
So
are there any questions?
Questions, please. Lots of time. And thank you for those absolutely stunning photos.
Thank you. You're welcome. You're allowed to ask questions. The teacher won't tell you anything. The teacher won't tell you shouldn't have asked.
I think that I'm going to steal some of Garth Foster's thunder here, but I think as a human being, you're doing very well of seeing the world from a butterfly's eyes and looking at the habitats at that scale. Yeah, but it's beautiful because you scale down your vision when you're looking at insects and invertebrates, and anyone who's looking at invertebrates will tell you that. And what seems small to the general, for people looking at it, will seem very large for anyone else because, for example, I bred all the Irish species, and you're just literally looking at them at eye level. You're making eye contact with them. So you learn a lot from just observing really closely. So, for example, if you ever see a small tortoiseshell butterfly lay an egg, or laying her eggs, what she does is she checks the food plant first. And they have 4 functional legs and 2 at the front. And those 2 are not used for locomotion, they're not used for walking. What she does is she drums the leaf with those 2 tiny stumps. You hardly ever see those legs, but she drums the leaf, testing for the nitrogen content in the leaves before she lays. And it's that forensic examination of insects that leads to these discoveries. Brian referred earlier to species we may have here. We don't know yet if they're here or not. But there's a lot to be found, a lot to be discovered. And one of the wonderful things about the Burren and the natural world generally, there's always something new to find. There's never a vacuum or an emptiness. There's always something to interest you. And it's a lifelong passion. You will never stop learning and never stop wanting to learn. And the Burren provides the perfect opportunity for that, as well as just being a really beautiful place just to soak up the atmosphere. From John Breen. I'll stay sitting if that's okay. He's wondering if you've ever seen any caterpillars in ant nests. He hasn't, but he's wondering if something like the brown hairstreak might. That's a good question, John. Thank you very much. I have not seen it, I'll be honest, and I have checked ant nests in the Burren to see if I could find brown hairstreak pupae. It wouldn't be the larva, because the larva leaves the food plant and pupae is on or near the ground. But
the pupa of the brown hairstreak does sing to ants, and it's audible. I've heard it myself. I've held the pupa up to my ear, and it does this, you know, this white noise between radio stations and the old transistor radios? It makes that noise. It's kind of a rat, and then it does a rattlesnake rattle interspersed with that white noise. So that's to attract ants which lick secretions off the cuticle, off the skin of the pupa. What I have noticed is that I haven't seen brown hairstreak adults where the grass is grazed really tightly and there are no anthills because they've been knocked over or destroyed. I've only ever found the adults where there are ant nests. So I think there is a symbiosis there in that species. But it's an interesting question. Ants have been observed tending holly blue larvae in the wild in Ireland. So they certainly do it.
One last quick question. Food plant for wall brown from Fiona.
The sad thing is, it's not all that fussy about food plants. The fescue grasses, even Yorkshire fog, cocksfoot, it's not a food plant problem. In the Burren Weed, there's a lot of fescue grass, and for example, I saw a meadow brown laying on it yesterday. Like, it's not the food plant that's the issue. It's the conditions around the food plant that are really important, and the amount of dry, dead leaf litter. So, for example, even with the Burren Fritillary, when the larva wakes up in spring to feed, it spends a huge amount of time basking on dry, dead leaf litter, like hazel leaf litter, for example, and it even roosts inside the curl of a hazel leaf. So that leaf litter build-up, the dead material, is really, really important for invertebrates. It's not just living material. So it's the conditions around the food plant that make the burren really suitable for invertebrates, especially butterflies.
Thanks, Jesmond.
Thanks very much, Anya. Thank you very much.
Keep chatting all day.
Thank you.